A humble young woman marries a wealthy old man. She never expected what happened next. James Harrison was a 78-year-old man, known in his country for his fortune, the result of decades of hard work and smart investments in real estate and business. Originally from New York, he was a man who had always led a disciplined and austere life, which allowed him to accumulate considerable wealth over time. However, life had left him feeling empty. His wife had died years ago, and his children, busy with their own lives, rarely visited him. Although surrounded by comfort, James felt lonely. One day, while he was leafing through a travel magazine, something caught his eye. An image of white sand beaches in the Caribbean, with crystal-clear waters and palm trees swaying in the breeze. Something inside him stirred. He had always dreamed of visiting those exotic places, but his life of work and responsibilities had never allowed him to make that wish come true. With a mixture of excitement and nostalgia, he decided it was time to make a change. He bought a plane ticket to the Dominican Republic, determined to enjoy a time of peace in that place that seemed to come out of a dream. Upon arriving in the Caribbean, James felt something awaken in him. The warmth of the people, the music, and the relaxed atmosphere were a radical contrast to his cold and controlled life in New York. He decided to stay in a luxurious hotel facing the sea, where every morning he enjoyed long walks on the beach and sunsets that left him breathless. It was on one of those walks that he saw her for the first time. Isabel was a young Dominican woman of barely 26 years old, with an exotic beauty and a look that captured everyone's attention. Her dark skin and dark eyes radiated a natural charm that was combined with a captivating smile. Isabel, aware of her attractiveness, knew how to use it to get what she wanted, and it didn't take long for her to notice the older man who was watching her with fascination. He smiled shyly at her, and she, without wasting time, approached with a friendly attitude. "Good afternoon. Enjoying our island?" she asked in a sweet voice, revealing a smile that showed subtle interest. James, surprised but flattered by the attention of such a young and beautiful woman, smiled back, somewhat awkwardly. "Yes, she is wonderful," he answered sincerely, still somewhat embarrassed. He would never have imagined that someone like her would notice a man of his age, but he could not deny the charm of this unexpected company. Isabel soon grew closer to him during the following days. Sometimes she would casually meet him at the hotel or on the beach, and she would always stop to chat for a while, asking him about his life and his experiences in the Caribbean. James, who had led such a solitary life, began to feel a renewed vitality. Isabel was attentive, listened to him with interest, and seemed fascinated by his stories and achievements. For James, her company was an unexpected gift, something that gave him a sense of youth and adventure that he thought he had lost. It wasn't long before Isabel began to hint that she had something special for him. In a soft, loving voice, she told him one afternoon when they were together watching the sunset from a restaurant facing the sea. "James, I've never met anyone like you. There's something about you. You make me feel safe, like I'm protected, and I like being with you." James felt his heart beat like it hadn't in a long time. At times, he himself doubted his emotions, but the sincerity apparent in Isabel's eyes seemed to belie any mistrust. She looked at him with a sweetness that he hadn't experienced in years, and although he knew that the age difference was notable, he began to consider that perhaps, in his old age, he could still find love. As the days went by, their relationship grew closer. Isabel began to tell him about her dreams, about her difficult childhood, and how hard it had been for her to get ahead in a country full of challenges. Although James had come to the Caribbean only for a vacation, something in his heart told him that he had found a reason to stay. The idea of returning to his solitary life in New York no longer appealed to him. Isabel gave him a reason to live again, and with every gesture and word, she fed that illusion in him. Finally, on a full moon night, under the starry Caribbean sky, James gathered his courage and proposed to her. Isabel, feigning surprise and joy, accepted with tears in her eyes. To him, Her love seemed genuine and sincere, a new opportunity that life gave her to be happy. However, to Isabel, that was the culmination of a well-calculated plan. From the beginning, her intention had been to get close to him when she noticed his status and wealth, and although she felt nothing beyond admiration for his money, she accepted the ring with a radiant smile. The wedding was simple but elegant, with few guests, since most of James' friends and family could not travel. For Isabel, that ring on his finger symbolized something more than a bond. It was access to a fortune that would transform her life. The young woman, although she acted sweetly and affectionately towards him, was already beginning to plot how to secure a part of his inheritance. Soon, Isabel realized that James was more secretive with his assets than he appeared. Although he had given her access to some comforts, he avoided talking about his will or any details related to his properties. This began to frustrate her, and every day she tried harder to gain his total trust, seeking information about his estate, asking him about his accounts and his properties in a surreptitious way. James, intoxicated by his love, barely noticed Isabel's subtle questions, believing her interest to be that of a wife concerned about their future. However, what Isabel had not anticipated was the complex network of people surrounding James. Soon, messages and calls began to arrive from his children and relatives in the United States, who were increasingly intrigued by their father's relationship with this unknown young woman. Some, suspicious of Isabel's intentions, decided to travel to the island to meet her in person. The arrival of James's relatives was a surprise that Isabel did not expect, and she began to fear that they might interfere with her plans. The day that James's children arrived at the mansion that he had rented to spend a season, Isabel felt the weight of their inquisitive glances. They, upon seeing her, could not hide their distrust, and although James received them with joy, Isabel noticed the suspicion in their attitudes. During dinner, the conversation was tense. Each question seemed like an exam, each look a judgment. James, although somewhat annoyed by his children's attitude, tried to calm the waters, convinced that in time they would accept Isabel. But she knew that her time was numbered. James' children were not going to allow her to take control of the family fortune without a fight, and they began to investigate her past, looking for any sign that she was only interested in her father's money. Isabel, for her part, decided to change her strategy. She began to show a more genuine interest in the family, striving to create an image of a devoted wife concerned about her husband's well-being. She tried to surprise James with affectionate details and tried to win the sympathy of her children, but they did not seem to be completely convinced. At every step, she felt that someone was watching, evaluating every gesture and every word she uttered. The relationship between Isabel and James' family became increasingly tense, and although he tried to keep the peace, the distrust was palpable. Isabel began to feel cornered, realizing that her plan was not going to be as simple as she imagined. James's sons had already spoken to lawyers and were preparing a plan to protect the family estate, while Isabel tried to get ahead of the game, devising how to gain her husband's absolute trust before they could act. As the months passed, Isabel had become an expert at manipulating James, making him believe in her devoted love and shared dreams. However, behind that facade of a loving wife, Isabel maintained a secret life that no one, especially James, could imagine. Hundreds of miles away, in the capital, the young woman was having a clandestine relationship with a man of her age, a charismatic and ambitious young man named Alejandro. Alejandro was aware of Isabel's plan from the beginning. They had agreed that she would marry James to secure a part of his fortune, and that later, when she got what she wanted, they could live together, without worries. Alejandro was as ambitious as Isabel, and although he sometimes felt uncomfortable about sharing her with an older man, the promise of a life full of luxuries and comforts was enough to keep him on the sidelines, patiently waiting for his reward. Secretly, Isabel traveled to the capital whenever she had the chance, under the pretext of shopping or visiting friends. There, she met with Alejandro in small, discreet hotels, where they shared their dreams and discussed their plan. However, Isabel did not count on the fact that the growing suspicion of James's children was about to ruin everything she had planned. One afternoon, one of James's sons, David, received an anonymous call. The voice on the other end warned him that Isabel was not who she appeared to be, and that someone had seen his stepmother in a luxury restaurant in Santo Domingo, accompanied by a young man with whom she seemed to be very close. David, who was already suspicious of Isabel's intentions, decided to investigate. Without saying anything to his father, he hired a private detective to follow his young stepmother's movements. Within weeks, the detective managed to obtain clear evidence of Isabel and Alejandro's relationship. There were photos of them hugging, sharing knowing glances, and even talking about their plans to keep James's fortune. David, upon seeing the evidence, felt a mixture of anger and relief. He knew his intuition had been correct, and that Isabel was nothing more than an opportunist. With the photos in hand, he decided to talk to his brothers to come up with a plan. It was necessary to protect their father, even if it meant breaking his heart. Meanwhile, oblivious to the impending revelation, Isabel began to feel cornered. James' children seemed increasingly vigilant, and James himself had begun to show signs of unease. She could wait no longer. Her relationship with Alejandro was in danger, and she felt that time was running out to secure her husband's fortune. She began to press James, hinting that they should discuss his will and that she wanted to know how he could secure his future. Although she tried to sound concerned, Isabel's interest in James's estate was so obvious that he began to feel a shadow of doubt in his heart. Finally, James' children decided to confront their father. One night, gathered in the grand mansion, they showed him the photos of Isabel and Alejandro. James, upon seeing the images, was devastated. The sadness in his eyes reflected the pain of feeling betrayed, of realizing that the woman he believed to be his partner was only interested in his fortune. His children, although hurt by the situation, consoled him, promising that they would not allow Isabel to continue manipulating him. The old man, heartbroken, agreed to what his children proposed. They recommended that he divorce Isabel, and so he did. However, the young woman did not accept the situation so easily. Isabel tried to convince James, begging him to listen to her, claiming that it was all a misunderstanding. She told him that those photos meant nothing, and that Alejandro was just an old friend. But James, for the first time, maintained a firm stance and made it clear to her that their relationship was over. Desperate, Isabel tried to manipulate her lawyers. She tried to find a way to keep some of James' fortune, but his children had already taken all measures to avoid any loss. James's estate was left under the administration of his family, and over time, Elizabeth was forced to accept that she had lost the battle. James, although hurt by the betrayal, was relieved to be surrounded by the true love of his children, who protected him at all times. The experience left him with a great lesson about the importance of honesty in family, realizing that, despite the shadows of his old age, he was always accompanied by those who truly loved him. Final reflection. Sometimes, the desire for companionship and love can blind us, leading us to accept what we shouldn't or to trust the wrong people. In life, not everything that glitters is gold, and it's important to learn to recognize when someone enters our circle with only hidden agendas. James, although he finally understood the reality, could have avoided this painful experience if he had listened to the signs and warnings around him. Do you think true love can emerge despite age differences? Or is it important to always remain vigilant when intentions seem unclear? Have you been through a similar experience? Or do you know someone who has?